In 2012, Honda unveiled the BF250 Outboard, a marvel born from the heart of an Acura V6, promising boaters automotive perfection on water. On paper, VTEC technology and a high-compression design signaled a new era of reliability and power. But beneath the chrome and confidence lay a flaw that would spark one of the most heated debates in marine engineering. Owners soon discovered corrosion-prone midsections, mysterious sensor failures, and maintenance costs that shattered expectations. How did so much ambition deliver such unpredictable results? And why do some insiders claim the industry still isn't telling the full story? This is the shocking truth behind Honda BF250 Outboards. Honda didn't just want to build another outboard, they wanted to rewrite the rulebook. The BF250 was their shot at the crown, a 250 horsepower flagship launched in 2012, built around the same J35 V6 that powered Acura sedans and Honda Legends. The promise was bold. Take everything that made Honda cars legendary: smoothness, efficiency, surgical reliability, and unleash it on the water. Early ads didn't hold back. Automotive perfection on water, the smoothest, cleanest, most fuel-efficient outboard you can buy. For boaters used to smoky two-strokes and rattling old blocks, it sounded like a new era. Inside Honda's R&D labs, the pressure was real. Engineers took the J-Series V6 and rebuilt it for salt and spray, marine cast heads, new water jackets, corrosion-resistant alloys. But the real headline was VTEC. Variable valve timing and lift electronic control, a Honda signature, now tuned for the tides. One engineer, quoted in a rare interview, said, "We set out to make an outboard that could run like a car, last like a legend, and leave nothing on the table." The BF250 wasn't just a product, it was a statement. Honda's badge meant peace of mind, and their blueprint leaned hard on that reputation. The goal? Win over everyone who'd ever sworn off outboards after a breakdown, every commercial captain tired of downtime, every weekend angler who wanted to forget about maintenance and just fish. The launch wasn't quiet. Boat shows, magazine covers, and demo days all hammered home the same message. This was the outboard you could trust, backed by the name that built the Civic and the Accord. But ambition has a cost. The BF250's spec sheet looked untouchable. VTEC, high compression, eco-friendly emissions, and a promise of low fuel burn. Yet even as the marketing machine roared, inside Honda, there were whispers about untested waters. Could automotive perfection really survive the chaos of the sea? The blueprint was set. The world was watching. VTEC was Honda's secret weapon. In the BF250, it meant the engine could switch personalities on the fly. Gentle torque for slow trolling, then snap open for full throttle sprints. The system worked by shifting cam profiles, letting the valves breathe deeper at high RPMs. On paper, that translated to a broader power band, better fuel economy, and a throttle response that felt almost electric. No other outboard in its class could claim a 10.0 to 1 compression ratio without flinching. That number alone set the BF250 apart. More squeeze in every cylinder, more punch per gallon, and a cleaner burn for lower emissions. But high compression has a dark side. More pressure means more heat, and the BF250 ran hotter than most of its rivals. Every blast of acceleration sent thermal loads soaring, especially in saltwater where cooling systems have to work overtime. The VTEC solenoid, cam followers, and intake valves all had to survive cycles of stress that most marine engines never see. Even the engine block, borrowed from Honda's J35 car platform, was asked to do more than it ever did on the highway. This wasn't just a car motor with a prop bolted on. Honda's engineers had to reimagine cooling jackets, water flow, and airflow to keep the beast in check. They added marine-specific heads and corrosion-resistant alloys, but the core challenge stayed the same. Could a high-compression, VTEC-powered V6 endure the constant assault of salt, heat, and vibration? Every time the cam lobe switched, the engine gained power, but it also added to the invisible tally of mechanical stress. The BF250's blueprint was a balancing act. Push the limits of performance, but never let the heat win. That's where the story starts to twist. Because the very features that made the BF250 a marvel in the lab, VTEC, high compression, race-bred internals, also created the perfect storm for stress. The next chapter would reveal what happens when that blueprint meets years of real-world abuse, one salty hour at a time. Saltwater doesn't care about blueprints or badges. By 2014, reports started piling up. Mid-sections on BF250s bubbling with white powder, paint flaking off in strips, and seams weeping brown streaks. Some owners chalked it up to bad luck, but mechanics saw a pattern. Aluminum eaten from the inside out, exhaust housings riddled with holes, sometimes after just a few salty seasons. The culprit? Galvanic corrosion, salt water, stray currents, and dissimilar metals turning the midsection into a sacrificial anode. Honda's epoxy primer and urethane top coat, meant to seal out the sea, often failed right where it mattered most. Once the coating let go, salt crept under the paint, racing toward every bolt and gasket. Invoices told the rest of the story. A midsection replacement for a BF250? Anywhere from $2,500 to $5,500, parts and labor. Some jobs ran even higher if the lower unit or gear case got caught in the crossfire. Owners posted photos, jagged holes, aluminum rotted away, anodes pitted to nubs. In Florida, a 3-year-old engine needed a full midsection swap. In Sydney, a charter operator faced a $6,500 bill after 5 summers. For some, the warranty picked up the tab. For others, it was out-of-pocket pain. Yamaha and Mercury owners running side by side on the same hulls noticed something else. Their engines looked better after the same abuse. Technicians pointed to thicker coatings, more anodes, and smarter drainage on the competition. Honda's design, with fewer anodes and thinner paint in the midsection, just couldn't keep up in salt water. The corrosion crisis wasn't just about ugly castings. It was about trust, downtime, and bills that could sink a season. And every time a midsection failed, another boater wondered if the promise of Honda reliability had finally rusted through. Heat doesn't just punish the block, it sets off a chain reaction, one weak link at a time. On the BF250, oil blow-by became a frequent guest, especially on high-hour engines. When combustion pressure pushed past the rings, oil mist would sneak into the intake, thickening in the crankcase, sometimes even raising the oil level. Mechanics called it making oil. To the average owner, it looked like a simple overfill, but the real culprit was internal stress, high compression, long idling, and rings working overtime. Too much blow-by, and oil thins out, losing its grip on metal surfaces. Bearings, cams, and followers all start to pay the price. Down below, the story got hotter. The gear case, the lower unit that takes all the torque and turns it into thrust, was supposed to be bulletproof, but overheating incidents piled up. Seals would fail, letting water slip past and emulsify the gear oil. Once that happened, metal-on-metal wear accelerated. Some owners found milky oil on a routine check. Others heard the telltale whine of a gear set running dry. Every degree over spec meant less margin for error. In salty bays, a failed seal could turn a $60 tube of gear lube into a $2,000 rebuild overnight. Paint flaking wasn't just cosmetic. Once the protective layer gave way, salt water crept in, attacking the aluminum beneath. The midsection and gear case, already stressed by heat and pressure, became prime targets for corrosion. Pitting around the skeg, bubbling at the seams, and brown streaks near the drain plug told the same story. Paint failure led to metal loss, and metal loss led to downtime. By the time mechanics opened up a tired BF250, the pattern was clear. Oil blow-by, gear case heat, and paint failure weren't isolated quirks. They were dominoes, each one tipping into the next. Every skipped flush, every high-speed run, every idle hour stacked the odds. And just as the mechanical failure started to pile up, a new set of headaches waited, this time in the engine's electronic brain. O2 sensors were supposed to be the brains behind lean burn efficiency. On the BF250, the part number stamped on every sensor, 35655-ZY3-C01, stood for Honda's promise of automotive-grade precision. In theory, this heated zirconia sensor read exhaust gases, fed data to the ECU, and let the engine trim fuel perfectly for every throttle setting. But what worked on a Civic didn't translate to salt water. Mounted high on the exhaust, the sensor sat in the crosshairs, exposed to hot gas, water vapor, and every ounce of salt that crept up the pipe. Failures started stacking up fast. Some sensors lasted only 25 to 50 hours before the check engine light flashed, and the BF250 dropped into limp mode. Owners described sudden power loss, stuck at idle, warning buzzers blaring. The culprit was almost always the same. Water intrusion corroded the sensor body, shorted the heater circuit, or contaminated the wiring harness. In some cases, the sensor's own heater failed, tripping fault codes and leaving the engine stranded. Dealer techs swapped sensors by the dozen. Some fixes held, but others saw repeat failures, sometimes less than a season apart. Honda tried to chase the problem with software updates, sending out ECM reprograms to widen tolerances and quiet the alarms. But that didn't solve the physical weakness. Salt water kept finding its way in, and every failed sensor meant another $100 part, plus hours of diagnostic labor. Warranty coverage was a dice roll. Some owners got free replacements, others paid out of pocket, especially as engines aged past the warranty cutoff. By 2018, Honda quietly pulled the O2 sensor from new BF250 builds or relocated it away from the exhaust stream. The change wasn't trumpeted in brochures, but service bulletins and new parts diagrams told the story. Later models ran without the sensor entirely, relying on mapped fuel curves instead of live feedback. For early adopters, though, the lesson was clear. What made sense in the lab couldn't always survive the sea. The O2 sensor meltdown closed the chapter on Honda's most ambitious electronics gamble, but the headaches it caused still echo in service bays today. 12 miles offshore, a charter boat drifted powerless, its captain on the radio calling for help. The BF250 had quit without warning. No smoke, no bang, just a silent blinking dash and a warning buzzer that wouldn't shut up. Guests huddled in the cabin, watching the horizon tilt as the wind picked up. It took 2 hours and a $1,000 tow to get them back to the dock. The captain's season never recovered. That single breakdown cost him more than just a day. He lost $10,000 in bookings as word spread, and the boat sat waiting for parts. On the service slip, the mechanic's note was blunt. Midsection corrosion, exhaust housing failed, parts on back order. For commercial operators, the BF250's promise of peace of mind turned into a high-stakes gamble. When the engine worked, it ran smooth and quiet, sipping fuel and letting guides focus on clients, not warning lights. But when corrosion crept in or a sensor tripped the ECU, everything stopped. One mechanic, hand-stained from years of saltwater repairs, put it this way: Honda made a dream to run, but a nightmare to fix. Once corrosion hits the midsection or you need a sensor, you're looking at $3, maybe $5 grand, and that's if you can even get the parts. Downtime meant more than lost money. It meant missed tournaments, canceled charters, and hard conversations with customers who'd booked months in advance. For some, the cost of repairs stacked up fast. $4,000 for a midsection, $600 for a sensor, weeks waiting for a crate from Japan. Every hour the boat sat idle, reputations took a hit. Some captains switched brands, others doubled down on maintenance, but nobody forgot the sting of a season lost to a name they thought they could trust. Honda's corporate response wasn't an apology, it was a game of defense. Warranty claims for midsection corrosion and sensor failures started drawing extra scrutiny. Some owners, just months past the cutoff, were told no. Others, with the right dealer ties, got quiet coverage or a goodwill fix. A dealer representative summed it up. "We want to help, but Honda's rules are strict. If you're not inside the window, it's tough." The real problem? Coverage gaps. Honda's marine dealer network was never as deep as Yamaha's or Mercury's. Hundreds of authorized locations, but not thousands. In saltwater hotspots, dealers were sometimes hours away, and the wait for parts could stretch into weeks. A failed midsection or a dead sensor meant downtime, sometimes entire seasons lost while engines sat in the queue for a crate from Japan. Marketing took a sharp turn. Honda leaned into stories from freshwater lakes and gentle-use owners, quietly downplaying saltwater ambition. The pitch shifted from bulletproof offshore to trusted for family weekends. For commercial captains and coastal guides, that pivot felt like a retreat. The promise of automotive reliability, once shouted from boat show rooftops, now came with a fine print as long as a parts invoice. The legacy debate was just beginning. Honda's dream engine weighed in at 622 pounds, 60 heavier than Yamaha's F250 and a solid chunk above Mercury's best. That extra mass didn't just affect top speed, it changed how boats handled, especially on lighter hulls. Yamaha's 562-pound F250 became the go-to for guides and offshore fleets who needed every knot and every gallon to count. Mercury's Verado drew the performance crowd with supercharged torque and quick service from a vast dealer network. Honda, meanwhile, found itself caught between worlds, praised by a loyal core for smoothness and quiet, but eyed warily by operators who'd seen corrosion eat through midsections or sensors blink out mid-trip. In online forums, the debate never ends. Some owners swear by the BF250, claiming thousands of trouble-free hours with meticulous care. Others won't touch one, pointing to resale drops in salty markets and stories of engines sidelined for weeks waiting on parts. Yamaha and Mercury have their own skeletons, gear case failures, pricey electronics, but their reputation for surviving saltwater abuse keeps them at the center of commercial fleets. Honda's cult following remains, but the big offshore fleets have mostly moved on. So was the BF250 a misunderstood masterpiece or a costly lesson in ambition? The numbers don't settle it. The stories don't agree. For every boater who calls it the best engine they've ever owned, another calls it the one they'll never buy again. When Honda launched the BF250 in 2012, they promised automotive perfection on water, backed by the advanced VTEC system and a 10.0 to 1 compression ratio. But as service records and owner accounts reveal, saltwater corrosion, midsection repairs costing up to $5,500, and O2 sensor failures as early as 25 hours have challenged that vision. The exact number of affected units remains undisclosed, and internal fix documentation is still classified. Today, Honda's marine dealer network is outnumbered by rivals, and competitors highlight their own durability in direct contrast. What is clear? Ambition alone does not guarantee reliability at sea. The BF250's story stands as documented proof that even world-class engineering faces limits in the harshest environments. The debate over whether the BF250 was a misunderstood innovation or a costly lesson continues, anchored by facts, receipts, and the voices of those who lived it.